Start?
Yes, we're beginning.
Okay. Okay, so welcome everybody to the 60th annual convention of the American Society of Dowsers, the first virtual one. We're glad to have you here. And just a couple logistics things. Most of you probably already know this, but if you kind of hover your mouse to the top of your screen, if you're on a computer platform, if you're not, figure it out. You'll see a little bar that has a microphone to the left and a camera just to the right of that. If you click on the camera, we'll be able to see your pretty faces. If you find that the presentation is stuttering or slowing down, you might try turning that off, because sometimes when you're transmitting your image and receiving one, it's a little bit too much bandwidth. That's a local thing. There are two icons, actually three icons in the center of that. Oh, actually, you guys don't have record. So please don't click share screen. Please don't click share whiteboard. And don't hang up until the end of the call. On the right-hand side of the screen, if you hover there, you'll see a number of options. You can click on the top box. That'll open up a chat. If you go to the second from the bottom one, you have a choice of speaker view or gallery view. So if you click gallery view, you can see everybody on the call. That's what Peter and I are doing most likely. If you click speaker view, you'll see who's ever speaking, which is me at the moment. That's why you can't see Peter. If you always want to see Peter, if you hover over his image, you'll see a little pin show up, and you can click on that, and that will pin it. Let's see. We are going to share some documents, and anybody on the call can click present or unclick present. Please don't do that, because Peter will let us know when he wants to have things up or not. And if you click it, it doesn't affect just your screen, it affects everybody's screen. I think that's the logistics stuff. If I forgot something, we'll add it along the way. Let's see. So I'd like to introduce Peter Blum. Peter studied music and sound healing with Carl Berger, Alsted Jamuden Baritia, Beautiful Painted Arrow, Pauline Oliveros, Fabian Maman, and several others. He's given workshops and sound healing concerts at Omega, A Vote of the Message, the International Hypnosis Federation, and most recently the United Nations. He's an ordained interfaith minister and multiple award-winning hypnotherapist, and is deeply interested in the effects of music and sound on the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health. And we'll put up some links for him in a bit. Yeah, Peter, Tal's suggesting that you tip your screen a little bit so we can see the top of your head. No, the other way. A little bit more. Perfect. Okay, thank you. He's going to talk to us about Himalayan bowls to center mind and clear space. Peter, take it away.
Good morning. I was so looking forward to meeting all of you in person at the conference. I've known a number of dowsers over the years. I've been in practice as a hypnotist since 1987 and presented at numerous hypnosis conferences, and there's a definite overlap between the two fields. My friend Roxanne Louise, who I've been seeing at hypnosis conferences since the early 90s, invited me to participate in this, and I was excited about bringing something that I am so passionate about, that I believe is truly magical and healing, the sound work, to a fresh group of people. So here we are in a different reality with a workaround. And it's great that we are able to figure out a way to share our work and information online in lieu of, and I know that somewhere on a parallel timeline, of course, we are all meeting in person at the actual conference. But here we are in virtual reality. And although platforms like Zoom and Callbridge serve well for information, for delivering speech, they are woefully inadequate when it comes to musical sounds. And believe me, I've been trying for months to figure out ways to improve the sound quality. And I have an external microphone here, which I believe helps a bit, but the audio interface does a funny thing. One of the most important features, and I'm going to, I'm surrounded by singing bowls here. I'm going to show you several different types of singing bowls and demonstrate them. Um, but one of the most important features about a singing bowl and the special types of sounds that they work with is that they typically have a very long, what's called um, decay in musical, in acoustical terms. In producing sound, we have an attack, which is where the sound starts. Typically, if you strike a drum or press a piano key down, that's the attack. There's no sound, and then there's sound. And then there's the decay, and or how long it continues to fade and still be audible. The audio interface for these platforms like Zoom and Callbridge is is cut off, set up to cut off the attenuation of longer sounds. In other words, when I strike a bowl, you'll hear the initial sound, and then it kind of gets wonky as it fades. So here's a nice medium-sized singing bowl. I have a very large collection. I've been collecting them and working with them for 35 years, and talk more about that. But and there are different ways of striking a bowl. So here's a felt. You're answering a query on the chat, Mark.
I'm just encouraging people to turn on their cameras.
Turn on the camera. Yes, I'd love to see your smiling faces for those who came in later. Um, uh, Unless it compromises your bandwidth. So here's a wooden dowel that is covered with some felt. And when I strike it, you'll hear the sound. Now, I can hear that still resonating and pulsating. I don't know if that's audible to all of you as well. Good. Okay,
Yeah.
perhaps we've made some improvements. All right, so there is hope. Um, so the metal singing bowls of Asia, specifically the Himalayan region, belong to a general category of oh, that was interesting. Okay. Um, they belong to a general category of instruments called metallophones. And these include contemporary instruments such as the xylophone or vibraphone, cymbals, wood chimes, tuning forks, etc., as well as older instruments from around the world, wherever metal was being found and worked. The gamelan orchestras of Indonesia, gongs from China and Southeast Asia, and bells and tingshas. Even though this presentation is going to be primarily about singing bowls, I do work with a number of other metallophones that fall into the general category of what we call sacred singing metals. So they're not just metal objects that make a sound, but they have been used traditionally in many cultures for spiritual purposes, for creating sacred space. For those of you who don't know, these are a set of tingshas. They are small paired cymbals. When I strike them together, so I've been a musician all my life, and I'm fascinated with sound and with different types of sounds. And when I first heard a recording of singing bowls in the early 1970s, I immediately went into an altered state. and I did not know what it was that I was hearing, but my curiosity was awakened, and I was on a quest, and I've been on that ever since, to find out more about these amazing instruments. And at that time, in the early 70s, they were not prevalent. They were not easily available in the West. But as the supply and demand as they became more known, it became easier and easier to find them. So I began collecting them. Now, if you want to study guitar or piano, you open up the newspaper and you look for an ad for a teacher. It's not quite like that in some of these other areas. I couldn't find at the beginning anyone, and so I became an autodidact. As one of my friends, Marco Dolce, who records under the name Shumantra, says, I'm a disciple of the bowls. So I just began collecting, almost obsessively, collecting singing bowls and playing with them, and playing them and playing them for myself and playing them for friends. And I was amazed at the sounds that these were able to produce. Um, Here is a very large bowl. This is one of my favorite bowls. Again, I was talking about different ways to get sound out of a bowl. So striking it with a felt or uh, rubber covered dowel, like this, is one way, but we can also go around the outside of a bowl, and that's what gives them the actual name of singing bowl. So if I go around, let's say with this smooth stick here, and it's got a little uh, half of a vajra up at the top of it, the thunderbolt from Tibetan Buddhism. If I slowly go around, and again, if you are interested in learning how to make a singing bowl sing, it's mostly a matter of experimentation. I will take a large bowl like this, and um, if they are on the floor, I have them on these rings like this that keep them from spinning around. But if I lift one to bring it with me, if I want to carry it with me, say place it near someone or bring it to a certain area, I would either suspend it on my fingers like this, or with a smaller bowl like this, I might just sit it on the palm of my hand. So there's a larger bowl. Now this particular bowl will keep going for 2 or 3 minutes. It's just extraordinary how they designed something that would have the ability to just continue to resonate for that long. Um, I want to talk a little bit about the types of sounds that the bowls produce. They're growing up in the Western world. Most of the music that we hear is based on what's called the tempered scale. So, for instance, it's generally agreed that when a symphony orchestra or string quartet tunes, that what they tune to is what's called A440. So that's the note A in the scale that we know, the solfeggio scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, Do. And everyone tunes to that same note, so they're all playing in tune. When jazz or folk musicians get together, they'll do something similar. so that they're playing and they say, "Oh, you're not in tune. Get out your." Now we have electronic tuners that say, "Get out your electronic tuner and tune up. Make sure you're in tune." So these are recognized scales that are based on certain set frequencies and the relationship between them. So although we may bend a note on the clarinet or by bending a string on a guitar, what's called a glissando, we still utilize the 12 tone scale, which is from C to C on the piano using all of the white keys and the black keys, the sharps and the flats. Um, that's why when we hear traditional North or South Indian classical music, which uses microtones or what they call shrutis, quarter tones, or the music of Bali or Java, we can become confused. It sounds dissonant. Uh, that is because it is dissonant. And uh, however, dissonance, most people are thinking we want to avoid it. And dissonance is an important and useful concept in acoustic therapy right alongside resonance. So because gongs, and you see I have a background of a number of beautiful large gongs behind me, and I was telling Tao, we had a little conversation about this, that I was curious some years ago, many decades ago, when I was first starting to fool around with the singing bowls, and I went to get a reading from a channel, and I asked about my relationship with music in this life and other lives. And I was told that I'm going to summarize this because some of them are not relevant, but in one particular lifetime, I had a position of great responsibility in that I was the keeper of the gong in the court of an emperor in China. And that it was my job to strike the gong at particular moments in time, such as the solstice and equinox points or full moon, let's say, to bring the vibrations or the frequencies of all the people in the province into coherence, into resonance. So, yeah, okay, anything to glorify the ego, that sounds great. I was an important person in another lifetime to make up for the fact that I'm not a very important person in this lifetime. But anyway, shortly after that, one of my friends pointed out that he said, a singing bowl is kind of like a standing gong. And I was, yeah, that's it's curved around, but it is basically the same idea that it is something that is struck. And for instance, just to give you a quick sample here of these, I have three gongs mounted here behind me. Um, this one is a Guato Sonora gong. Again, I don't know how well that sound is translating through call bridge, but you get some sense of it. This is what's called a chow gong, popular in China. And this is what's called an Atlantis gong. Okay, so how does one, we can talk about the composition of the bowls. I have a PDF that talks about them. When I first got involved in this, there's a lot of, in every field of New Age and spiritual, there's a lot of uh, mythology. A lot of mythology, and I accepted what I was told at the beginning, which was told to me by someone who I uh, trusted, had done a lot of research. My head is cut off. Yes, it is. There we go. Sorry about that. You know, thank you for reminding me. I was saying I have this son that's coming in from a sunlight, and it keeps moving, and I'm trying to move back to avoid the glare on the screen. Um, the All right, so working with the bowls, and I found a few people that knew something, that had traveled over to do some research in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bhutan and Nepal, where these are originating from. And they were saying that, the bowls are made of 7 elements. And I thought, oh, that's great. This is we know that there's a certain numerology that shows up consistently in many different fields of metaphysics, Eastern and Western mystery traditions. We like sevens, we like 13s. There are certain 12s. There are certain numbers that show up over and over again. Dao, you had your own system there with 15, and I just thought, okay, all right. I sort of that wasn't something I'd come across before. But here we have these 7 metals, and they said there's gold for the sun, and silver for the moon, and mercury we're talking about the prior to the discovery of the trans-Saturnian planets. Gold for the sun, silver for the moon, mercury, um, copper for Mars, lead for Saturn, antimony for Jupiter, and I forget what, there's one for Venus. But anyway, I repeated this and I taught it in workshops until I met someone who was studying antique bell making. And he said, that's nonsense. He said, I've been over to England to the foundries where they work with the bell metal that makes these giant resonant bells. And, in every culture, again, um, we find over and over again that the use of metal has been used to call people to worship. Temples and churches and cathedrals all have a carillon. They have bells that ring to call people's attention, to call them into worship, to call their attention. At the beginning of a Zen meditation, they will have a single bowl and they will strike it once or 3 times, and you'll go into meditation. So there's something about focusing the attention on that sound. The metal sound has that effect. But he said, listen, if you put gold and silver, they have a much lower melting point, and so they're not going to be. If anything, there's maybe homeopathic amounts of it in these bowls. And what we find, and now perhaps we could post that PDF, Mark, of the composition of the singing bowls, or I can actually do this as a screen share, right?
I'll put it up just a second.
Okay. Ah, great. So here, you can still all hear me as you're looking at this. It says that they did some research, and that this study concludes that the singing bowls developed out of 2 distinct metalworking traditions, one inherited from ancient Persia and Khorasan, the other inherited from ancient Thailand and Cambodia. Singing bowls are made from a high tin bronze alloy. Alloy is made from 77 to 78% copper, 22 to 23% tin. This type of metal is known as bell metal bronze and is found in most of the world's best bells, gongs, and cymbals. The high tin content is partly responsible for the beautiful tone produced by singing bowls. Very little variation in the alloy has been found in hundreds of singing bowls tested over period of 5 years. So it says these. So okay, we can go back to the regular screen now, and I just want to share one thing with my own screen share here. That is, hmm, let's see if I can do this now. Application window. Oh, uh, hmm. Mm, all right, never mind. I was going to show you a funny picture of people with bowls on top of their heads, because most one of the most effective ways and one of the most profound ways to experience a singing bowl, you need a one that is large enough to do it. And I have some photos of people that were taken at various events where I have a number of people with a singing bowl, and here's one. This is a beautiful, you can see the hand hammerings. So the authentic antique singing bowls here were produced by pouring them over a mold as the molten metal was setting, pouring it into a mold, and then as it came out, hammering them. And this tempering technique, this annealing technique, actually improves the sound quality of the bowl. And so here, that's got a very pure tone. And one must carefully balance on the flat top part of your head. You all have a flat head, right? Up at the top. And gently, that's the operative word. You can do it for yourself or you can do it for someone else. Tap the bowl lightly. Now, what happens is that two things. First of all, up here is your fontanelle. This is the part of when a baby is born, that's the soft part that slowly the skull forms over it. But when the baby is born, that's a very soft spot. And they say that in some energetic systems, they say this is where the crown chakra is connecting us to the heaven energy. So from the top of the head, this bowl is coming in direct contact with all of the cranial, the bones of the skull and the craniosacral fluid that is flowing through the brain. And it is all being resonated directly. It's one thing when it comes through the air, that's very lovely. And we can hear it coming through the air here like that, or striking it. And here's a softer mallet. So I talked about having different kinds of mallets. Here's a soft, and it brings out a different range of frequencies. There you get a higher range of frequencies. In general, I'm trying to fit a lot of information into a relatively short period of time. This was originally going to be a 4-hour workshop, but bowls are, as I said, hand hammered. Each one is unique and different. They were not made on an assembly line. They're not machine lathe. So people ask me sometimes about crystal bowls, and I like the sound of them, particularly when they're played by someone who's skillful and tuned in. But they are almost too pure. If I want to have a very pure sound, I'll use tuning forks. Tuning forks are precisely tuned. But what I love about the singing bowls is that they produce many different tones. One single bowl will produce two or three. People will often ask me, I'm shopping for a bowl, and there are all sorts of systems that are out there. And they'll say, so what? I want a bowl that is for the heart chakra, and what note is that? And I'll say, there are people who use these systems, but I personally think it's a very individual thing, and that well, your heart area is different than someone else's heart area, and your heart area on Friday is different than it may be on Sunday afternoon, on Friday morning. So we need to be present in the moment, as with all other forms of energetic healing. The more attached we are to a preconceived system, and there are all manner of systems, and some of them are useful, but the more attached we are to making the person and the treatment fit the system, the less able we are to be present with that person and tune into what it is that is needed or being asked for. So to balance this out, I believe, and I'm speaking generally here from an informed layman, that if I go for an acupuncture treatment, that it falls into either energizing, calming, or tonifying. And so we could say that in working with somebody to center them, to heal them using um, sound, that you will assess this person. Um, are they depressed? Do they need something to energize them? What sort of sounds would energize them? On the other hand, if they're too agitated, if they're too hot, if they're too nervous, what sounds would calm them down? And what part of the body would these sounds go to? Again, I don't have a system. So if somebody says to me, what bowl, I'm looking for, they say, I'm looking for a bowl for the heart chakra, and that would be a D, right? And I say, I don't know. First of all, every bowl makes many different sounds because the complex interactions of these frequencies manifest as multiple interference patterns that are perceived as rhythmic pulses, waves, and shimmers. And so that's why if I strike this bowl here, it's a smaller one, and now you can hear a pulse that's going wah 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 wah, and you can also hear a shimmer in there that's going wah, 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 wah. And to give you an analogy, from a visual analogy, we often talk about the pebble effect. If you drop a pebble into a pond and you see the ripples are going out, so these are the sound waves that are emanating out omnidirectional from the bowl, and then you take another pebble and you drop it in the pond, and there's concentric rings of ripples going out, and then you take a third pebble and you drop it into the pond, and you've got three of these, and where those waves intersect, they create what's called in physics an interference pattern. So they can either reinforce each other or cancel each other out. And that's what causes those wonderful beat patterns and pulsations and shimmers that make these sounds so complex and chaotic and interesting. You don't get that with crystal bowls. You don't get that with tuning forks. You don't get it with a guitar if it's perfectly in tune. But if it's slightly out of tune, you get these. Um, Actually, and this is true also for drumming, because I don't just work with the bowls. I also work with what's called shamanic journeying, where a drum is used, and rattles, and rain sticks, and all sorts of instruments for different effects. And they said that these multiple simultaneous rhythm patterns that are perceived as these stimulate the reticular activating system in the brain, a part of the brainstem that acts as a kind of alert system for the upper cortex, preparing it to receive and assign meaning to what we're perceiving, to incoming sensory data. And it's been theorized that these sounds swamp the reticular active aiding system, effectively masking other sensory input. With the cortex focused on these rhythmic signals streaming from the RAS, other brain functions, normally drowned out by cortical chatter, come to the foreground, such as the emotional, intuitive process of the limbic system. This may partially explain why listening to these sounds, which would also include drumming, can sustain trance states, uncover buried memories, and awaken nonlinear creativity. So they've identified different types of bowls from these for those who are interested in this. The largest bowls that are, I showed you one earlier. This one is called a jambati. It's a large bowl with hand hammers, and the notes are in the low range. So you don't always need a striker. You can use the corner of your hand there, just like that. And here's another jambati, which I like to jokingly say is my holiest bowl because you see it has a small hole in it, which unfortunately happened in the early days of shipping before I learned how to extensively bubble wrap these when I travel with them. It does not affect the sound, however. So you hear a ah. So that's a jambati bowl. The most common type of bowl is what's called a Manipuri bowl. And you see it has more of a slope to the sides. They're generally smaller than the jambati, and they have a different type of sound. Again, every bowl that I have in my collection of about 35 bowls has been selected by rejecting at least 20 other bowls. So not all bowls are created alike. If you go shopping for a bowl, you want to actually, if possible, be in a place where you can sample and try them yourself rather than ordering one online. It's very hard to tell, even from a sound sample, what it is that you're getting. But to actually hold the bowl in your hand, this is quite a bit heavier than it looks like it would be from the size of it, and to see how it sings. I see you're showing me your oh thank you, Mark. I was like, why is he showing me his phone? Oh, you're showing me the oscillation, the sound pattern. Great. You're muted.
Yeah, so that's a spectrum analyzer.
Very nice. Yeah, there are people who have done some research in these areas and found the different patterns and there is so just to continue on. So that's a Manipuri bowl, which some say comes from a certain area in India where many of them were produced. Manipuri, I don't know. There's not to be confused with Manipura chopper. And then there's this style, which are have a much more. They're smaller and they have a a lip or a rim that goes up almost directly vertical. Here's one of them. You see, this is an older hand hammered one. It's a little bit darker, the veneer, and it has a very clear bell-like sound. Still, nice pulsation in it. One, 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 one. Here's another one, also Tado Bati. Tado, I believe, means straight. And last is, I only have one of these. They're harder to find. This is called a pedestal bowl. And it has a little part of the bowl is this. And I thought, well, that's nice. It could sit there. But then someone said, yes, but look, you can also hold it like this and play it, and you can move it around somebody while you're working with them. So this has a very high pitched sound. So let's say I was working with somebody around the head, around the area of the head and the neck. Generally speaking, this is a huge generality, that high sounds are more likely to be connected with the upper part of the body, low sounds with the lower. If I do a layout, typically if I work with someone individually, I'll have them lay down and I'll surround them with bowls about a foot away from the body. I had studied with a wonderful healer, Frenchman named Fabien Mamon, who posited that of the sheath around the body, that the etheric body was closest in, and this was influenced in healing by doing practices like Tai Chi or Qigong, and that a little bit further out was the emotional body, which extends 1 to 3 feet away from the physical body, and that this was affected medicinally and therapeutically by sound, and that the next body out was the intellectual body, which was 3 to 8 or 6 feet out, and this was affected by light. So Fabian had a whole system working with colored glasses and lenses and different colors of light while listening to sounds. Again, you can Google him if you want, and he's got a whole body of teaching on that. Um, so the, a friend of mine who was living in Germany sent me this package, and he said, you might find these coming in handy. I didn't know what they were at first. I opened them up. They're little rubber suction cups, which allows me to take any bowl, no matter how large and heavy, wet this, apply it to the bottom, and I've got a pedestal bowl. So I can put it over someone's head, move it around them. Obviously, the sound emanates from all sides of the bowl, but the most complex frequencies are happening with the interaction within the bowl, because the sounds that are being made are bouncing back and forth, and they're intersecting with each other. Now, there's a principle that I wanted to talk to you about, that's very important for this work, that's called entrainment. And yeah, I'll open it up for questions after I just cover this one thing. Entrainment is a principle in physics that says that two objects that are vibrating close to the same frequency will tend to match up. In our work as healers, as communicators, we're always seeking rapport. We want to be in rapport with the people that we're working with, and one of the best ways to do this is to entrain with them. If we can match their breathing rate, we are entrained with them. So there are, the sun keeps moving. I'm going to move my computer back out of the sun here. I think that's better. And move myself up. All right. That should get me in the sun and the screen out of the glare. Yeah. All right. So our brain is always producing rhythms of electrical. There's electrical energy in our brain all the time, and this is what biofeedback and neurofeedback is based on: is entraining the brain to present to it through light and sound frequencies that will move a person's brain into an alpha theta brainwave state. I have a set of tuning forks that are called brain tuners that are based on producing those frequencies in the difference tone that will suggest to a person acoustically through hearing these rhythms. They will hear let's say a alpha is 8 to 12 cycles per second, or theta, and these corresponds with states of relaxation and uh, what is it Herb Benson called the relaxation response. Any shamanic work or meditative work will involve slowing the brain down usually. Usually. There are exceptions, but usually getting into an alpha or theta brain wave. Alpha is, as I said 8 to 12. Theta is even deeper. Theta is 4 to 7 cycles per second. What I believe these ancient Bon culture, because we don't know, really where they came from. There's very little written about the balls, but if the anecdotal evidence says they come from the Bon tradition, which predates Buddhism in the Himalayas, and they intuitively, without the use of spectrum analysis, they must have known that some of these interference patterns that were being created by these bowls happened to be in the alpha and theta brainwave state. So when you produce, by striking or making one sing, when you produce these sounds and you listen to them in an accepting, taking in state, you will match frequency. It's called the frequency following effect, as well as entrainment. So this is an excellent way to do this for sake. Now, the one thing I didn't cover, which I know is of some interest to dowsers, is the idea of clearing space with the bowls. And a couple of times I've been invited in by people who said, well, you do this shamanic work. Can you do an exorcism? Can you do a space clearing in this house? There's some funky energy there. Something bad happened there. There was a bad transaction that went on or something. And I've said, sure. And I go in and I burn some sage and I bring some bowls. And I don't have a particular bowl or particular system. I'm working there and I'm tuning into the energy intuitively, and I'm setting my intention. Now, in the field of sound healing, Jonathan Goldman, who's one of the pioneers, has said that frequency plus intention equals healing. So the intention is very important. Setting an intention and then producing a frequency, whether it is you're singing or drumming or playing a bowl. So I think that brings us up to, we have about 10 minutes left, and I thank you all for your attention. I hope, like Margaret Mead said, the famous anthropologist, she had written on her tombstone, she lived long enough to be useful. So I hope that something that I have said here has been useful to you. Now, the other thing that Mark is going to do is he's going to post links to some SoundCloud recordings, audio recordings, that's in the chat area. So if you want to hear really high fidelity recorded under studio conditions and hear these exquisite sounds combined, because I've been playing them one at a time. Imagine when you get 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of these bowls resonating at the same time. You're just bathing in a sea of frequencies. And there's also a link to a YouTube that I made recently with a colleague of mine, so you can see a video of us doing this in a performance setting. I'm working with, behind my gongs, there's some Sabian resonating bells, and she's singing and playing violin. So anyway, thank you all. I hope you learned something useful. If you have any questions, we will also post this on the whiteboard. Yes, the question. Mark, we're going to put in, or I can do this now. Yes, I can. Use text tool. Here we go. It's gone.
I'll put it back up. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. I'm going to use the text tool here, and boom. All right. Peter L. Blum 108 at gmail.com. soundsforhealing.com. If you want to call me, I'm happy to talk on the phone, 594-1209. So there's your information. You can take a screenshot of that or copy it down. And um, I do, yeah, thank you. Okay, so we can go back off of that now. In answer to your question, Donnelly, I have been in the habit for the last 10 or 15 years because people used to say to me, I'd come to a conference and I'd bring all my bowls and I'd play them, and people would say, well, I want to buy one. I'd say, no, these are my babies. No, I don't sell these. It's my family. So, but I got the idea that people were interested. So I started to shop around for some extra bowls that I would have. And I'm now a purveyor of bowls. So I am, if you want to tell me the size approximately and price range, and I will be happy to send you some video YouTube clips or sound samples. Again, there are some decent, reliable ones online, and you can find them just as easily as I can by doing a Google search and seeing what you find. Um, any other questions?
Yeah, so if people have questions, they can raise their hands, or there's a little button you can raise your hand on the right-hand side, and we can unmute you if you can't unmute yourself. Ellen sounds like she's unmuted. Or maybe that's you. Maybe that's you, Peter. Yeah, actually, I don't think Ellen has audio.
Yeah. Speak. Anyone? No. You're in a profound state of meditation at this point.
Well, I've got a question. So given all you know, and I realize you've shared just a tiny fraction of that, what are the things that you're most curious about learning going forwards?
Huh. What's the least that I can do to get the most effect?
And so can you talk about, that sounds like that's been a long-term pursuit. So how has that evolved over
Well,
time? What did you used to do? What do you do now?
In the I'll tell a brief story. In the 1970s, I was involved in the study of improvisation, and there was a school here where I live in the most famous small town in the world, in Woodstock, New York. And there was this wonderful school here called the Creative Music Studio. And the people who were running it, a German jazz musician, Dr. Carl Berger, and his wife Ingrid, were very involved with Tibetan Buddhism, as was I. And they went out to Naropa University in the 70s and were headed up the music department for Trungpa Rinpoche. Now, there happens to be a large Tibetan Buddhist monastery in Woodstock, and they asked one of the senior monks there, Kalu Rinpoche, who was senior meditation master in the Karma Kagyu lineage, if he would come to the school and give a meditation that could be used by all of the music students. But they said, not everyone here is a Buddhist. Can you give them something that would work even if they're not Buddhist? So he came and he did a beautiful piece of calligraphy that hung on the wall there for many years. And the calligraphy translated as, listen to the sound disappearing. So there's this point where we're always fascinated when something appears. That gets our attention. We're hardwired for that, to notice change and notice difference. From back when we were protecting ourselves in the jungle, a prehistoric time, something moved, we notice that. If it keeps moving, we stop, our attention wanders after a while. The same thing with a sound. So, I can strike this bowl and I can say, listen to the sound disappearing. And that in itself becomes a meditation. And I did I've done many dozens of performances over the years, and at one point I did one with my friend Philippe Garnier, who's a French sound healer, and the the name of that particular sound bath, sound immersion, was "Listen to the Sound Disappearing," and we decided that we would make a note and not make another sound until we could not hear that sound any longer.
Hmm.
It was one of the most spacious events we've ever done. And we agreed that the next step, if we could pull it off, would be to do one in the grand tradition of John Cage, where we did not make any sounds at all. And that would be the ultimate listening experience, is if there was, we just had to listen to the ambient sound and imagine what that could do. So we've got 3 minutes left. I would talk a little bit of the fact that if you're looking to shop for bowls, it's increasingly difficult to find an antique bowl. 30, 35 years ago when I was shopping, there were more of them around. Now you're more prone. These are most of these are older bowls. Now they started when they started doing what I call knockoffs. They weren't so good, but the demand side of the supply and demand equation prompted a number of merchants and craftsmen to begin to produce the modern equivalent of the ancient bowls. And recently, they've been sounding and better. Very beautiful modern bowls are being produced in India and Nepal, as well as unlikely places like Germany and Brazil. So, if you're a purist, if you're a collector, and you want the old singing bowls for their authenticity, fine. But you can make. Look, I use cowbell sometimes. I use camel bell. It doesn't matter. It's what's making the sound that's important. Make beautiful sound. And I'll leave you with one more little trick here. I'm going to send some sound through the screen to all of you now. So I'm able to shape the sound by holding my lips at the corner of the bowl and actually project it out toward all of you through the screen with intention that you all have a wonderful experience with sound as you explore it. Feel free to contact me, email, phone, website. I love this work and I love sharing it with other people. So I think we're just about finished. Any last questions, comments, anything? No? Okay. Well, thank you all. See you
Yeah,
later.
and on that note, pun intended, thank you so
Yeah.
much for your
Thank
talk, Peter,
you.
and
Okay.
entertaining us both with the sounds and your
That was
insight,
great.
and it was really lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Okay. Peace out.